everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. So this is the 5th program in our Sister Bay series of local history, speaking engagements. The way we find people is really just to look at the businesses and organizations that have a long, rich history and maybe even an unusually large footprint on the community. So last year was kind of similar to this year, in the sense we had Al Johnson's and we had On Deck and various people like that who've been around for generations. That's really what the point of these things is just to show the through line in our community here and who's been around for a while and making their mark. So this year, for anybody who wasn't present for some of these, we had Door County Medical Center, Brian Stevens, the CEO, talking about the new facility here in Sister Bay. It was very interesting. Dick Burris, former Director of Emergency Services in Door County, did a great presentation back in July. Paul Vogelman in August, of course, talking about Rudy's and the diner and that business. Paula Anschutz was here recently, just in September, from the Sister Bay Bowl, getting into the Bowl's history, and I know she had some great photos, because I helped her find some of them and scan them, and just it's great when we can combine some AV with these things. And tonight we have Chris Hecht. And so why do we have the fire department here tonight? The fire department has a long, rich history. And in fact, formally, not 100 years, but in practice, really over 100 years. So Chris Hecht is the current fire chief, and having worked with him for a while, what's interesting to me is that he sees more broadly than maybe the usual fire chief does. That's just only my opinion, because he's very much into history, and he's into community building. And I can't think of a more perfect fire chief to have in place during our recent pandemic. I mean, he really brought the community together in some, feel free to clap, yep, and really some unique ways. And without being, a very unself-assuming guy, not an ego monster. Everybody still knew, who was putting this plan together. And he did a fabulous job. Just what a great person to have in charge there. Please welcome Chris Hecht.
Can you hear me in the back if I don't use a microphone? Sure. Yes. I have a tendency to wander, and a microphone doesn't work well for wandering. So tonight is kind of dovetailed into our living history project that we've been working on for a couple of years with the fire department. Marianne O'Dowd, who's here, is kind of the spearhead of that. Mr. Weaver, welcome.
Thank you.
For those of you that don't know, Door County's longest serving fire chief.
I married the fire chief's daughter and inherited the fire department 64 years ago in June. Still on the department.
Thank you. As we get started tonight, it's about, if I can do it on my own, it's about a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation. And we'll talk a little bit about how we hope this flows tonight. So the project history. A couple of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we were asked if we wanted to participate in the memorial walk for the Liberty Grove Historical Society, where they have a walk of honor with the bricks. And that really kind of was the impetus for us to really sit back and look and start digging into what is our history, who were our first fire chiefs, how long did they serve, and we started to dig. So that was kind of the beginning. When those bricks were laid, I gave a brief speech, Lee Kelfer and I, and Marianne O'Dowd came to me and said, hey, I'd like to help you with this project and maybe spearhead that. Could I do that? And thank goodness she did, because had she not, it would have languished for lack of drive and ambition and all the things she brings to it that so many of us are torn in so many different ways. We've done some oral interviews. We've got many more to do. We kind of tried to target the key people that we felt that we might lose sooner than others to get those done. Her dad.
Pinch yourself.
Those of you that have seen me speak before know I wear my heart on my sleeve. So what are we doing? We're looking for photos, memorabilia, artifacts, anything else that anybody might have. Whether you were directly involved in the fire department, you have a family member, or you happen to be at a yard sale somewhere and you say, hey, that looks like our fire department. We need and we want that stuff, and we will make copies of it and we will get it back to you. That is your property. We're not going to take it from you, but please let us have that information. Okay? And it's an ongoing project, right? And we go in fits and starts just like any project, but we're really making great strides. So, what is tonight's program? What I did is I took the history of the department and I divided it by fire chief. Right? We've had 7 past chiefs, so we're going to look at the major accomplishments that I could find through, or Marianne or I could find through research in the village minutes, the town minutes, and newspaper articles. We're going to look at some of the major fires that the chiefs had. There are absolutely other major fires that we're not going to cover tonight because A, there wasn't enough time, or I couldn't definitively come up with a date, time, and location, all of those things that are kind of important, right? And then some interviews. We really want this to be interactive. There are people, this is being recorded, there are people in the audience who are taking notes. Please, if you have something to add, add it. There is an incredible amount of history in this room right now for the fire department. We need to leverage this information to get you thinking. And I'm going to pick on Jerry a little. Jerry and I sat today and went through this, and what should have taken 30 or 40 minutes took an hour and a half because it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It got Jerry thinking and remembering and telling stories. And that's what we want. Okay? Photo disclaimer. Some of the photos are appropriate for what's on the screen. Some of them are just good pictures of people that used to serve the fire department. And that's why. Yes, sir. It's interactive. I'll say it again. If you have a question, put your hand up. If you have a story to tell, tell it. Okay? Because if we go to the next slide, you're going to forget it and we're not going to be able to do that. Okay? Does that make sense? So, who were our past chiefs? Adolph Roeser, our first chief, 1930 to 1946. Right? Founding father. Right? That's a very familiar name in Sister Bay, a lot of history. Right? Elvin Schrader. We still cannot find a picture of Elvin Schrader. I've had all kinds of people say, oh, I've got a picture, or his family has a picture. Nobody can find me a picture, and we've been asking for years. Nobody can find a picture of this gentleman. We would really love to have it. In our wall, in our fire station, for those of you who haven't been there, in the main hall is a photo of all of our past chiefs. The years they served, and above them was a white helmet with a customized shield for them. So what number of chiefs they were, the years they served, and their names. We would love to have a photo of them.
Adolph Roeser. Years ago they had water fights. And they had what real hoses at high pressure, like 2.5-inch hoses. And what they didn't squirt it at a barrel on a wire. They backed up against each other, and Mel Schroeder got an eyeball blown out with 2.5 holes.
Drink that down there, Marion? Here we go, right? Here we go. We started down that path. Thank you. Clyde Casperson, 1951 to 1966. It was an honor to know him. When I moved here 30 plus years ago, Clyde was still here. And we used to walk with our kids who were young past Clyde's house, and he would always meet us out at the end of the driveway and always was telling stories. And it was just an honor to know this man. Dick Wilkie, 1966 to 1970. We could find very little information of major changes or accomplishments during these decades. Mr. Hartzell, Tom Hartzell. And we're going to go over each of these people and some of the things they have. Lyle Lundquist, right?
My classmate.
Your classmate?
Mine too.
Yours too? And Mr. Steve Mann, who is with us tonight, thankfully, and was one of my mentors. Right? I look back and I have 3 or 4 fire chiefs as mentors. Butch Young on the island, Mr. Weaver, Mr. Mann, and Mr. Lundquist made me who I am. So what did it look like before the fire department? Not much, right? We saw it in the video. Bucket Brigades, City of Sturgeon Bay, was their fire department was incorporated in the 1800s, long before anybody else. So they were around. When you start to research, you don't find them coming this far north very often. It had to be pretty bad. Adolph had his own pump at the sawmill, and we talked about that, and we thought it was a different pump than it was, but you find written words about the Roeser's pump coming to different fires. And then the shipyard had some firefighting capability. But really before that, there was very little. So when you go back and read, even with the fire department, typically the first building was always lost. But what the fire department did that they couldn't do before the fire department was prevent it from spreading into building to building to building. Right? And before the fire department, that is all, when you read it, and we'll see some of it, it just kept, the fires would just keep growing until they essentially ran out of fuel, ran out of buildings to burn. Some of the early fires, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about this. It is Fire Prevention Week this week, right? Another reason why we're doing this week is Door County's worst fire, as far as loss of life. October 8th, 1871, Peshtigo Fire and the Williamsville Fire. There is contradicting stories about whether the fire jumped the bay or not, depending on what you read and who you research. Tornado Wayside Park is a memorial to this loss. There were 35 people that died in the fire. 2 died in the well, and then 2 chose to commit suicide before the fire could take them. Largest loss of life fire in York County. Credited with a major transition in Southern Door from lumbering and wood to agriculture because it burned off all of the wood down there, right? Same time as the Chicago fire, and those 2 fires together, the Peshtigo fire and the Chicago fire, is why this week is Fire Prevention Week. Okay. Some of the early fires, we heard about it on the video. The Sister Bay Fire, August of 1812, 4 stores burned. I put up there what the stores were and kind of where they were, or where they were in relation to what's there today. And this information comes from the Sister Bay Historical Society website, but the Frank Bunda building where Husby's is, actually 2 stores. Mrs. Bunda's building where On Deck is. The Klondike, which they describe as a shuttered saloon, where Drink Coffee is. And the Lerner store currently where Henry's Park is. Okay, and a large hotel, Henry Peck Hotel, and 1 residence occupied by the Lerner family. And it started in the store, the Lerner store, but they never were able to determine the cause. They talk about extremely high winds that day, and there was just no way to get ahead of it. Okay? When it burned this time, because it burned again, right? Yeah, it burned fun to burn again. So she worked there then in 1812 or 1912?
No, I don't know, 1912, no, she wasn't there.
No. Because what year did it burn again?
Early 40s.
Early 40s? Would that have been when she was there?
When she was there.
Yeah.
I was a puppy.
Some other early fires. April 15th to 21, R.J. Shepard at Sister Bay estimated lost $4,000. So you can see a barn, a garage, an ice house, and a car. The fire kept spreading because they couldn't get ahead of it, right? John Larson fire, I believe it's the chimney, but they made comment when you read the newspaper article about it that he had just finished wiring his house for electricity. And then the Larson home and a sheep farm, both a total loss. Local insurance company. Again, you heard about that in the video. You know that the insurance companies were a big thing early on, and if you research fire department history, not just here, but anywhere, the insurance companies were a big deal, and they had their own fire departments, and you used to have an insurance company or a fire department mark you would hang over your door that signified who you had your insurance from and who would come put your fire out. If you're ever in my office at the fire station, there's one that hangs over my window in my office, an old mark. Okay. But the Liberty Grove Fire Insurance Company was founded in 1891 with 28 charter members. In 1941, they'd been in business for 50 years, with now 609 members, and they held 99% of the rural insurance in Liberty Grove. All right? They make note of some minor losses, but they never had to make a special assessment on their policyholders to cover a loss to that point, right? 01, they had a significant loss, their first significant loss, but they didn't talk about the amount. And their largest loss in the 50 years was Jacob Johnson's in Gills Rock for $3,200. Okay? So what's interesting is this is all still pre-fire department, right? No fire department. So we had the fire 1912, tremendous loss. We had some significant fires here. In 1928, the village went to the village electors and asked to form a fire department, and it was voted down. We don't need a fire department. Okay. Then the insurance company had 2 bad years, 1929 and 1930, and then they voted to have a fire department. It's unclear, what tipped the scales. Was it the losses creating too much burden on the insurance company, so the rates were going to go up, and they needed, or was the loss, the dollar loss or value loss, getting to the point where the insurance company needed to do something to prevent that knock-on effect of the fire spreading? As we go through this, you'll see multiple times where the insurance company and the village and the town have multiple conversations about the things that the insurance company wants the fire department to do or the village and the town to do, and they're exerting their influence on the village and the town. Okay.
What drove a lot of it is the fact that the progress that was being done in the villages and town that drove to have fire protection. That's where Ephraim started with the big hotels they had. They didn't have no fire protection. All they had was a tank wagon and bucket brigade. And that was back in 1930. And that's in 34 when they built the station.
Yeah, so Ephraim and Sister Bay, started within a few years of each other. So in April of 1930, there was a motion made and seconded that the village board should provide fire equipment as protection to the village. Okay, so that was the beginnings of the fire department. The next month, or that month, towards the end of the month, April of 1930, they put together a group of people and they went to Wild Rose, Wisconsin to look at fire equipment. It talks about them coming back and giving a report. It doesn't say what they did or what they bought or what the recommendation was. But on June 23rd of 1930, Adolph is appointed the fire chief, and these 8 men are the first 8 firefighters in Sister Bay. There are actually 9 with Adolph. So Clarence Broad, William Bunda, Emil Becker, William Burns, Gus Carlson, Lawrence Husby, Martin Husby, and Martin Gisky. Where are you about this? So, relation? Your grandfather. Did he ever tell you stories? No. Did you know he was one of the first 8? No. One of the first 8.
I think someplace, I remember in my grandfather's garage, he had, I will say, 6 or 8 plaques in very ornate frames. One, he was a postmaster, and when you're a little kid, 8, 9 years old, boy, it's them. And mysteriously, all of them just,
I'm sorry?
and I would bet, after what you said and seeing this, that one of them had to do with my grandfather being a
Founding member.
founding member. I just have to believe that. But that's interesting.
See all these firefighters that you see here on the border, they all had businesses in town, and that's what kept them in town, so they had a fire department. That's what you're saying about the whistle, they blow at the station to get the attention of the people in town. They knew when they heard the siren, they had the station.
At that time, it was the Sister Bay Fire Department, and the town had no fire protection and direct fire protection. There are beginning to be discussions about a joint venture, and if you read the tea leaves and start to read between the lines, it appears that the village is starting to leverage their fire department to the town in an effort to get the town to help pay for the fire department. This is a clip out of the Advocate from October 7th of 1931, who may concern the village of Sister Bay fire truck will not answer any fire calls outside the village limits unless payment is guaranteed. Right? In other words, if you live in the town, we're not coming unless you're going to pay us. Right? In July of 31, the village makes a motion and approves that they're going to charge $25 for each fire call and $3 for each tank discharge. At that time, the fire truck was a soda acid style truck, where it would essentially chemical reaction between an acid and a base would push the water out of the tank and put the fire out, or expel the water and try to put the fire out. But what you can see is they're starting to leverage what they had to the town to get the town to ante up. Okay? Door County Advocate, May of 33. A good fire department properly equipped with modern apparatus is not a luxury, but a vital necessity to rural communities. Prior to that, in 32, there was a joint meeting between the village and the town where the town agreed to pay up to $600 towards the new Chevy truck, and that they would cover a 50-50 split on all general expenses and the cost of upkeep. In 1936, there's an agreement between Ephraim and Bailey's Harbor and Sister Bay for joint coverage as needed. Best I can tell, that is the first mutual aid agreement that affected Northern Door in 1936. And we'll see later, there's, and even today, mutual aid is changing all the time. But 1936, it appears, is the beginning of what we call North Mutual Aid or Northern Door Mutual Aid. New equipment and pay. 1932, the chief and the assistant chief are allotted $1 per hour. All others $1 per trip or 50 cents while away from home. Pretty progressive though, 1932 to pay them already, right? They've only been in existence for 2 years and they're being paid. 1936, the department purchases an Evinrude gasoline-powered pump. It's rated at 165 gallons per minute. And it can pump, and they bought 2,000 feet of hose. When Jerry and I talked about it, he does not remember that pump. There have been a variety of portable pumps in the department over the years, but nobody that I've talked to actually remembers that pump. Okay. 1933, after much discussion, they buy one smoke mask at $3.40. And in 1941, they buy a second one, and the insurance company agrees to give them a third one. Growing pains. Again, we're going to read between the tea leaves. We're going to read the tea leaves a little bit and read between the lines. In January of 1944, the fire department presents a letter, a joint letter of resignation from at least 5 volunteers, and the names are in the minutes. I chose not to put them on here. A joint letter of resignation from at least 5 of the volunteers due to unjust criticism. And it's unclear, by reading the minutes, it's unclear who the criticism is from and what the criticism is about. In the minutes, there are a couple of letters, a hyphen, and a couple of letters, but it's not legible as to who it is or what it is. The village is able to resolve the issue and calm the rebellion, or whatever you want to call it, down a little bit. But then in 1946, there's a petition presented to the village to act at once to get adequate fire protection for the village. I don't know if Adolph at that time was having trouble with the troops, if there was discord among the fire department. But what you see is a trend here, and it's right at the end of his tenure. I'm gonna jump ahead one and then come back, or a couple and come back. Because when he leaves, Melvin Trainer comes in, and when Melvin comes in, they talk about him being a temporary chief until the department is properly organized. Okay? So they've identified there's a problem. They've had a joint threat of resignation petition, and now they say this in the minutes, okay, until the department is properly organized. At that time, he is, shortly after, by April 25th, he is now talked about as being the fire chief. But when he is appointed the temporary chief, Bob Burns is his first assistant chief, Chet Mann, Steve's dad, is the second assistant chief, George Lindahl is the third assistant chief. Okay. So again, do I know that for sure? No, but when you start to connect the dots, it appears that something must have happened or something may be happening. I'm going to back up. Some of Adolph's major fires. December 15th, so about 5 months after the department was formed, they have a total loss from a chimney fire, possibly their first structure fire as a department. I can't find anything in between when it was organized and when it was as this one. Not to say that there weren't fires, they're just not maybe in the advocate where we can find them. March 27th of 1937, Jensen's clearing home burns. And there's significant articles wrote about this fire. His private library paintings and etchings were said to be, at that time, priceless. And it was all lost. There was a second fire at the clearing under Lyle's tenure, I believe. April 26th, the Garrett Bay Inn fire, first of 3 fires at Garrett Bay Inn over the years. Okay. Multiple sheds, the powerhouse, water tower, and the cause was unknown. February 1st, 1941, Emil Paul, I think I'm saying that right, Paul, P-H-A-L, Paul? Anybody know that? Both on him, Emil Paul. Possibly the first fatal fire for the fire department. Okay. His home was a mile south of Sister Bay, so it's probably very near where we are here today, because it was on the highway south of town. And they believe that he died of smoke inhalation prior to the fire consuming the house. I believe that from what I know and the people I've talked to in my tenure here, we've had 4 fatal fires in the Sister Bay Liberty Fire Department. We'll talk about 3 of the 4 in this presentation. So we talked about Melvin coming in and who his 1, 2, and 3 were. In 1947, there was a special village meeting regarding the new fire station and the new fire truck. At that time, the estimate was $8,000 for the truck. The fire truck purchase was tabled, but the fire station passed 34-2.
Is that the current one that's the post office?
Yeah, good. It is that one right. Right, so our current post office was the second fire station. The first fire station, at best everything I've been told, and talking to Jerry, he agrees, was Adolph Roeser's house, which is the little 3-story apartment on the kind of the goofy corner at the end of Maple Drive near the Sister Bay condos.
I think it was where Salt and Joe and came along for the,
Oh, it was at his house?
Yeah, underneath.
Yeah, you can kind of see where the windows are. But on the Sister Bay Historical Society webpage, there is a beautiful picture of that house, and there's no doors there. So I don't know if that picture was taken later, or maybe even before, maybe it was converted for doors. But you remember it there?
It's underneath that building, they're back in
Yeah. All right.
like a basement underneath the building.
Yeah, I was in the basement.
You remember it?
Yeah.
Because you lived right around the corner.
And I was in that bottom, which is now an apartment.
Yeah.
It's really long,
Yeah.
so it was ideal for parking.
Yeah. So Steve grew up where Roots is now, right? Your
Yes.
dad's place was right there. So right across from what was the old bank, now the village administration building, is Steve's childhood home.
there was a little building, a coffee shop. Now,
Did you hear her?
I didn't hear that.
So she's talking about a little building where there's a coffee shop, Steenie Sigerson.
And then Joe DeLuey came along and had this fish market.
Joe with a fish market, Joe DeLuey with a fish market.
Joe's Fish Market was on the main
That's the
street,
little coffee shop just now.
where the coffee shop is now.
And
That
along-
was Joe's.
I don't know how long they were there, but I remember
Oh,
coming home from school.
And seeing the fire truck in there?
No,
Oh. What was in there?
Well, it was post.
Oh, post office, okay. So the post office is built, started in 48, completed in early 49. It is officially dedicated October 14th of 1949 during Fall Fest, right? So this week, again. A lot of people's favorite fire trucks right there. 1948. What's that, Jerry?
Roy Super Service.
Roy's Super Service.
Berto.
Right, your now Berto, but your
That was my dad's gas station.
gas station.
Repair
Gas
shop.
station. So 1948, the Ford Bean high pressure pumper is purchased. The old truck, the agreement for the town to help pay for it was the old truck had to go to Ellison Bay when this truck was delivered. Do you know where it was stored? Because we've got conflicting stories. Jerry can't remember either if it went to Sid's or if it went to Harvey Olson's or where it went in Ellison Bay. No. Okay. So $5,851. Okay. I won't tell you what a new one costs now.
Tell us.
Tell you, the one we ordered 2 years ago was $1.2 million. If we had to buy today, it'd be a 1 point. Fire trucks went up 51% in the last 24 months. It's just that. Not to go down the rabbit hole, but it's. So in 1948, joint purchase between the village and the town of new apparatus cost to be based on assessed evaluation. So that's the first time we start to see. So that's how we're currently shared between the village and the town. How our budget is split out is based on our evaluation. This is the first time we can actually see that in writing, 1948, how that happens. And interesting, as we go forward, you'll see currently it's 1/3, 2/3. The town pays 2/3, the village pays 1/3. And as we look at the numbers going forward, even back then, that's how the balance was. Fire prevention and pay for service. There were no fire codes at the time, right? It was kind of the wild, wild west. You can do what you want. Even in 1947, no fire codes. So I'll jump down and come back up. So Chief Schroeder required that the village themselves take action at the village hall. They had to put in 4 fire extinguishers. They had to keep their fire doors closed, and the exit doors had to be removed and turned around so that they swung out from the inside. Okay? So very early ideas and forward thinking on their part about fire prevention and life safety when they didn't have to. 1947, joint meeting the village and the town. They upped the pay, $2 for the first hour, then $1 each hour after that. And they start to talk about volunteers and then regular men. Regular men would have been ones that were officially on the fire department, appointed by the village and the fire chief, and then volunteers would have been the people that just showed up at the scene to help. And they talk about the different pay rates. And Mary Ann, help me with the verbiage. There's somewhere in their minutes that talks about the verbiage. If a volunteer is on the scene doing a job and a regular man shows up, the regular man is to replace the volunteer and take his equipment away from him, essentially moving him to something else or dismissing him. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that.
What you're saying, and thank him for his service.
Thank him for his service, right. So then they're continuing to acknowledge volunteers, but they understand that they have a regular group of people that are responsible responders. Okay. Changes in structure. A fire commission is formed, right? November 16th of 1948. It's the village minutes. We have, sometimes they had joint meetings once a year between the village and the town, and they would both take their own minutes, and we have copies of some of those joint minutes. So November 16th to 48th, the village minutes establish a fire commission, 1 from the village and 2 from the town. The village agreed to make a special assessment for support of the fire department, and all funds would be administered by the fire commission. And the fire commission to be paid $3 per meeting and the clerk $20 a year. Mr. Diltz was the clerk for the fire commission for 20 years, nearly probably.
Less than that.
For a long time. You know, and so this is the beginning of what he eventually took over.
I got more than 20 times.
Yes, you do. The town minutes show the same assessment. They also show that the chief's pay goes up to $50 a year, and that the town or the fire department has to pay the village to rent the fire trucks back. So the village owned the trucks, and the fire department had to rent them, and the fire department had to rent the station from the village. A way to get the town to pay 2/3 of those costs, right? Sharing in that cost, right? First fire commissioners, Ted Grassi, Eric Peterson, and Ernst Isaacson.
Chris,
Yeah.
Eric Peterson, my grandfather.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear, Fuzzy said that Eric Peterson
Yes.
is his grandfather. Did he ever say anything, tell stories, or?
No.
No. Did you know he was on the fire board?
No.
No.
I knew he went to fires because I saw his name show up on some stuff, but I
Yeah.
didn't know he was on the commission.
Yep, he was a founding member of the commission, not just on the commission, a founding member of the commission. Becoming a recognized fire department. Again, a joint meeting from the town side of the meeting in 1951. In attendance were the Liberty Grove Fire Insurance officers with suggestions. And it was, Mr. Kessel was the presenter. Jerry, help me with his first name. What was Kessel's first name? You and I talked about him today.
August.
August Kessel. Sorry. Well, it is actually Mr. August. I should just read my own notes. So Mr. Kessel suggests that the fire department or the village and the town consider signing the fire department up with the state fire commission and being recognized as an actual fire department. Prior to this, the state essentially didn't know they existed. And if the fire department is okay and approved by the state, that they would receive their 2% dues. And this program continues today, and we'll talk briefly about it. But it's essentially a payment from the state that comes back that relates to 2% of the commercial fire insurance that's collected in the community. And it is used to underwrite the fire inspection program and fire education programs. The other things that the town, or that the fire insurance would like to see is a listing of water sources, large cisterns in the town, improved training for the members. And it's interesting when the meeting adjourned that they left the meeting and then went to the fire station to look over the equipment. I don't think I did a slide on it, but there's other instances where the fire department, where the insurance company comes to the town and the village, because the town and the village asks the insurance company to help pay for a fire truck. I mean, it's unclear whether they actually helped or not, but when that request was made, the insurance company had some demands that they asked to be met, including improved access, driveways cleared and widened, the fire department phone number by all the phones in the homes of the people in the community, and better addressing and marking on the driveways. Kind of the same battles we fight today, right? But it's unclear whether the fire department went forward with any of those, and it's unclear whether the insurance company helped pay for it. It's unclear when we became listed with the state. There are no records with the state going back before 1978. And in 1978, we received $2,002. Today, we receive over $61,000 on 2%. Pays more than 10% of our budget.
Going back to the August Capitol, I think Ray Nardine was at the same time writing insurance for the town.
Okay.
By recollection, right? And that's where Gary lives now.
Okay. Chief Schrader's major fires, the Garrett Bay Inn, second fire for Garrett Bay Inn. I just put this in there because it was interesting. Gus Klinke was noted in the newspaper as going to help with the fire. I have never seen his name associated before with the fire department or helping with the fire. Whether he just happened to be there or not, I don't know. The Wiegand fatal fire, this would be our second fatal fire. This was a tragic fire with 3 young children perished in the fire.
2 children.
2 children and the babysitter. Yeah, so 3 young children.
And shortly after that fire, because there was a water shortage, the village put in a 40-gallon cistern, which still exists. It's right across the street from the administration building.
So I don't know if you could hear what he said. After the fire, the village put in a 40,000-gallon cistern across from the current village administration building and next to what would have been your house at the time.
Yeah, and if you see that stone wall, there's a small 4-inch pipe.
Yeah.
That's where they put the suction hose through the wall. A few years ago, that wall got knocked down, and when they rebuilt it, they made sure that pipe got back in there.
Jerry and I were talking about that cistern today, and Jerry was talking about, Jerry used to be the village maintenance, head of village maintenance before you, obviously, but he talked about in his tenure putting a new steel top on that, or over the manhole on it, right?
It was a wooden cover on it for years. I put steel in there. I don't know, I wish somebody would check into it now. Because that's been.
Kids throwing stuff in there.
Lots of rockets keep in and out. What's interesting is the chief himself makes an attempt to rescue the kids. He enters the building 3 times up a ladder to the 2nd floor. He is able to find the babysitter, but unfortunately, she had already passed at that point. The younger brother of these 2, Dale Wiegand, is a friend of mine, continues to serve in a carpet with the fire department. He was born after this happened, but he talks about this fire in stories that were related to him by his parents.
There was a truck Wiegand that had the gas pump in 30 days. And I think this is his offspring.
Could be. Clyde Casperson, 1951 to 1966. We happened to get a hold of some old Town of Liberty Grove financial reports, and in the back of the town's reports were paraphrased reports for the fire department at the time. So we were able to see call volumes from 52 and 54, what their expenses were, and kind of what their plan was. Like in 54, replacing the 29 Chevy with a 50 GMC, and what that was anticipated to cost. The old Dodge replaced with a 1954, and they were using the tank. Self-filling cisterns added in Sister Bay Park and in Ellison Bay, and Jerry talked about those. He thought that the one in Sister Bay got filled with sand. They were big caissons that were sunk in the park adjacent to where the post office is today.
You just ran across the name there that I recognized, Gus Klinke, and when you say, where did they house the fire engine, more than likely the Klinke's
Could have been in his garage.
in their garage.
Yep, absolutely.
That would be my idea.
Yep. Changes continue on Clyde. New fire board or some new members, Ted Grassley, Eric Peterson, and Isaacson. In 51, the village and the town agreed to increase the fire department's funding for operating expenses. Village 250 and the town 500. Again, you can see that 1/3, 2/3 coming back through. In 1952, again, we'll read, kind of try to read between the lines here, read the tea leaves. In a joint meeting, the village and the town both agreed to the following verbiage, and this is a quote. It is agreed the fire chief has the authority to request assets, public or private, as needed, and he is not responsible to any others, and he alone is the judge of when a fire is under control. Okay? Reading through the tea leaves, in that same meeting, you'll see it in the next slide, they talk about the county of Dorr paying the fire department $500 to help defray the cost of a very large, they call it a forest fire in 1952. And again, reading between the lines and some of the other stuff I read, it appears that they hired multiple private contractors with bulldozers that were needed to help contain that fire. And it would appear that people were second guessing or criticizing the fire chief at the time, why did you do this, or how long did you keep them? And this was a response from the village and the town to support their fire chief and say it is his authority to make that call, and he does that right, and nobody can second guess it. Do you know about that fire in 52?
I sure do, I was there to help fight it.
Big fire?
My dad says, you're big enough to carry it in your bumper, you can go there at night, sit there and tend to the fires, because what it would do is burn underground and come up where it hadn't been burned. And that's,
Just like
we
that.
fought that for 5 weeks,
5 weeks? And where was it?
out in Grassy Farm, out at the hills, and they bought, Adolph Roeser drove the fire truck down the bluff.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Here's that $500 from the county to help defray costs. In 1954, both boards, again, in a joint meeting, adopt a whole new set of bylaws. There are no copies of that bylaws that I could find, but in the minutes from this joint meeting, they adopt each section. There's like 14 sections of the bylaws, so it must have been fairly extensive and fairly sweeping change at the time. But again, we don't know what it was because we can't find it. Again, additional funding from the fire department, the fire board, 2,100 and 700. Again, the 1/3, 2/3. Clyde Casperson's major fires, the Gare began third time. This time they burned it down completely. The innkeeper was woke by her cat pipsqueak, and they saved 10 cats. The fire was believed to be electrical. Multiple large wildfires that year, requiring bulldozers to make fire breaks. 1952, that's what Niles was talking about. The Gills Rock Hotel in 58. You remember that one? Were you still up there, or were you gone from up there?
I was there in 58.
Yep. Baby bus lines in 60. Commonwealth Anderson shed fires in 65. And what's interesting there is that's the first time I saw anything about it like a juvenile fire site. There were multiple fires and multiple vandalisms done by these people. And Curtis and Harvey, just a picture of, just a good picture of those two.
You got one other one there, it's just going to.
There are a lot of big fires that aren't on here because I couldn't, with the information I had, I couldn't pinpoint dates and times. And yes, there are many big fires that aren't here. Richard Wilkie, very little wrote about Mr. Wilkie and any accomplishments or major changes that happened in his tenure. And Jerry and I talked about it today, and even Jerry could say, everything he knows about him was the furniture store, right? There wasn't, nobody knows, you know, he was only, I shouldn't say only the chief, but he was the chief for 4 years, and for whatever reason, even in the village minutes and the town minutes, there's very little mention of the fire department or any major changes that were taking place in this period. Major fires, Rowan Orchard, Micro Housing, Terry Jacobson, home complete loss. Beard Barn Fire number 1. Saved a lot of cattle. When I moved here in 1990 or 91, Mr. Beard would come into the fire station once in a while, and everybody gave him a hard time about his 2 barn fires. And I said, this must have happened in the last 5 or 10 years. And then I started digging in, and it's like, well, this was 30 years ago, and they're still giving it. we have a collective memory as a fire department. Tom Hartzell, 1970 to 1975. Major accomplishments, reorganized the fire department. My understanding from talking to people is he kind of changed the structure of the department and the way the department operated. Improved some training, applied for some state training programs. Again, trying to tap into some of that state money and then state recognition. He built the first Ellison Bay Fire Station, which is now the current post office. If you were, I'll give him kudos, and I wish he was here tonight, Mr. Lee Telford, he talks about, Lee Telford got himself elected to the town board in the town of Liberty Grove to make that happen. Right. Fire department built its own brush truck. That was Mr. Knudsen and Mr. Lyle Lundquist built that. Right, Lyle donated the cab and you bent the metal, and the two of you put that together. Correct?
I did the sheet metal, Lyle supplied the truck, we did the welding. 275 oil tank on the back for the tank.
That truck still exists today. It sits at the Stahl residence on the south side of Beaver. And it runs, it still runs. Mr. Hartzell brings in a battalion chief and his son, who was either lieutenant or captain on the Chicago Fire Department, to provide some training for the guys, just trying to improve the training and change the direction of the fire department a little bit. And he bought Engine 7 in 1970 How. Hartzell fires, the Fitzgerald home fire, Beer Barn fire number 2. This was just an interesting photo. When Jerry and I looked at it today, we believed that this was probably the fire board at the time.
I talked to Donnie today.
And is that what he said? Yeah.
He said, I gotta see the picture, and I'll tell you who's got his head covered up.
Yeah. So that's the fire board. It must have been, I was wondering if it was like an Arlene party. Where it was. So she, those of you that didn't know her, don't know Arlene was married to Lyle, and they would have these Christmas parties where Arlene would put on elaborate skits and plays and make people do things that they were very much not comfortable doing. And it appears that this is the fire board of the time dressed as firefighters. So Jerry, you're going through who they are? Billy, when he's done, say who they are.
So the first one on the left is Bill Bastian, the second one is Lee Rogers.
Robert Peterson, he was.
Robert Peterson. So this is, we, John Kepsel, but we don't know who this is.
Donnie's on the right.
Steve Telfer was on the fire board at one time.
Yeah.
That'd be a lead question. It was just a great picture. Lyle Lundquist, 1975 to 1993, updated the SCBA's. Yeah, most of them donated, it appeared. Bought the first ladder truck in the county in 1986. They paid $180,000 for it. That truck continues to be in service on Washington Island. First custom cab trucks in the department, again in 86 and 91. It was really, he and Greg worked hand in hand a lot and really fine-tuned the mutual aid agreements at that time. And really codified, codified a lot of that and bring people together so that we were playing in a sandbox a little nicer together. First Jaws of Life, 1978, they used it within 2 weeks. I sent this picture to Greg Dilson. He was able to tell me who they were taking out of that car.
I wasn't sure, I wasn't positive.
All three of them say yes.
Top of the hill.
What was
Yeah.
that?
John Henderson, he worked at Mavericks
Oh,
for many, many years. Early in the morning, somebody found him wrapped around a tree like this. And significant injuries, but he came out of it.
Okay, well, thank you. Pager alerting, and I didn't know this until I talked to Greg today. Sister Bay Liberty Grove was the first rural community in Door County to have pager alerting. The city of Sturgeon Bay was #1 with pagers, and then Sister Bay was #2. First rural, and they had to put up their own tower and their own paging system. They put the tower on top of the water. They put the radio tower on top of the water tower by the old school at the time. And what year?
What? 80, 85,
Okay.
somewhere in there, 85, 84 maybe.
And then in April 1st of 1982, we have this letter from, at the time, Fire Board Chair Bill Bastian. introducing the state mandated fire inspection program to the business owners of Sister Bay and Liberty Grove. That program continues. Again, that's part of our 2% dues. And in order to get our 2% money, we must perform the fire inspection. But interesting to read that letter from him to them, explaining why this has to happen and what to expect. Right? So, continued Lyle's accomplishments, heavily involved in EMS with the fire department members. Many of them became EMTs and kind of were that, I don't know, Greg and Dick tell me, kind of the bridge between Casperson and the county when that all happened. He was responsible for countywide apparatus numbering. If you're ever at the fire station, you look at some of our pictures. There's ugly stickers on some of our fire trucks for a period of time where we dropped into a countywide numbering system and they went out and went to Youngers and got stick on numbers and slapped them on fire trucks. Responsible for building the current, or not the current, the one old fire station, which is the current village shop. And he, without doubt, hands down, had the best fire chief's car. And that car exists today. One of his grandsons owns it. And I don't know if it's by Barber where that car is, but it is still around. And he willed it to his grandson. Some of Lyle's fires, 40-acre woods fire, 50 to 60 members for 5 hours. Sister Bay Village Hall, which is the photo on the bottom. Hotel de Nord, November of '82. Emmons Knapp, which was in Sturgeon Bay downtown. Our ladder trucks went to Sturgeon Bay and pumped all night long. And Steve Collins is barn fire number 2. I don't know how well you can see it, but the top photo was Lyle standing on the roof ladder on a roof that's obviously significantly involved in fire. And he's got the pipe out the corner of his mouth. Right? Always had the pipe out the corner of his mouth. I don't know who this is. I think that's Jim Sequist. Jimmy Sequist. Mr. Steve Mann, who was with us tonight. Steve's accomplishments include, he participated in the Conifacting study in 1997. The Conifacting study was actually initially driven by the Egg Harbor Fire Department and their want to get a ladder truck. But this was really the first look at Northern Door County Fire Departments individually and what could happen in the future if they came together. And at the end of that study, all the way back in '97, the recommendation was to have a joint fire department in Northern Door County. Obviously, we have revisited that multiple times, and for different reasons, usually political based on money, that has never gained traction. Okay? Standing before you as the fire chief, currently, I believe that will happen. I believe that it has to happen at some point in time. Will it be in my tenure? I don't know. Okay. Steve brought CAFs to the fire department, which is and continued to be cutting edge technology as far as how we put fires out. It has dramatically changed our effectiveness at putting out a fire and really leverage our manpower or lack of manpower and let our members be more effective at what we do.
What does that say?
Compressed air foam system, so it's Class A foam, so it's soap, air, and water. You're essentially, the little kids bubble blow that you make bubbles, it's that in a giant scale, right? We're taking soap and water and air, and we're making bubbles. The advantage of a bubble is it's got a lot of surface area, sucks up a lot of heat, and you're essentially using Dawn dishwashing detergent, right? And if you put Dawn in anything, it sticks, right? It penetrates the wood, breaks down the surface area. So it just makes water work better. It makes our membership work better, right? Because we can leverage our people better, right? And that's been an ongoing battle. I'm sure if we talk to Adolph Roeser or everybody in between, I know if we ask Steve, he would tell you that one of the biggest shortcomings of our fire department and any volunteer fire department is lack of staffing. Right? The fire board at one point in time in Steve's tenure asked for some input and some thought on they were trying to plan long-term based on the growth that they were seeing. In your tenure, we had Pheasant Park, right, come up. Was Birchwood under you, and Scandinavian Lodge?
Scandinavian Lodge.
Right. So in Steve's tenure, lots of major, large buildings being built. Pheasant Park, Scandinavian Lodge, some of those, a big addition at Wagon Trail, I believe, the 3-story addition at Wagon Trail.
Yacht Club and Sister Bay.
Yacht Club and Sister Bay. So Steve was faced with a rapidly expanding community, and rightfully so, concerned, brought it to the fire board, and the fire board did implemented what was called the Safe Fire District, where they looked at where we were at, where we needed to be, and what long-range planning should look like based on the growth that they were seeing. We all know the growth really hasn't slowed down. There's been some dips, ups and downs, but generally, growth in Northern Door County looks like this. And we are all trying to keep up with all of our infrastructure, from our fire departments, our sewer and water departments, everything. That's what that was meant to do. We also saw some improvements in ISO when all of this happened, which didn't necessarily affect your residential fire insurance much, but made some significant improvements in commercial fire insurance rates in our fire district. Steve started the Link to Service Awards program for our membership. So it is essentially is a carrot to get people to be active and, more importantly, stay active as they start to get older and start to have families and kids, and they have other things pulling them in other directions. The Link to Service Award program is a carrot that's out there that says, if you stay active, if you are a vital member of this department, we, the fire commission, are going to pay you X amount of money, and the state will match that money, and it goes into an account that's managed by the state. And when you retire from the fire department, you will get this money. But you have to stay active. Steve was responsible for a large donation for the purchase of our hose truck, which really changed the way we fight, or not really fight the fire, but the way we supply water to our fires. And as part of that, was able to establish the Sister Bay Liberty Grove Firefighters Association as a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. Prior to that, we'd always had a men's association or a men's fund, but this really set the fire department up as the Firefighters Association up as a standalone not-for-profit entity. So we could take donations in, give those that were donating to us credit for their taxes, and then leverage that money to help the community. And he was responsible for that. This is a great picture. This was, at least at the end of Steve's tenure, his 2 assistant chiefs, right? Lundquist and Davis, right? Harvey was the assistant chief under you too, or not, or was he gone when he? Yeah, he started, right. So, yeah, it was Harvey and Todd when you came in, right?
Yep.
And then when Harvey retired, he was replaced by Mike Lundquist, right? And then when Todd, how did that go? When Todd left and Mike Skell became the assistant chief?
Something like that.
That's right. Something sure about the order. Right. And then a great picture of Lee Telfer doing what Lee Telfer loves to do, right? Right. I've never seen him so happy. Some of Steve's major fires, and again, we're not hitting anywhere near, on any of these chiefs, we're not hitting anywhere near all of their fires. The Marston Anderson fire, and multiple of people in this room are related to Marston. He lost his shop. JJ's, when his t-shirt shop burned, or Chris's shop burned, we're able to say that where the current waterfront is. One of many fires at JJ's over the years. The Bill Wright fire. Well, and it's true. And if you go back, and we kind of touched on it, right? Beard fire, 2 fires. The Garrett Bay Inn, 3 fires, right? There are certain places that just seem to have a lot of fires, right? And JJ had a lot of fires. Bill Wright's fire, which is right in Sister Bay. The Edward Anderson fire in Gills Rock. This was our 3rd fatal fire. This was Steve's fire. The Going Garbage fire could have been far worse than it was. It was a horrible, stinky mess, but luckily the building didn't burn. The Turtle Ridge fire. Lots of magnesium there for whatever reason. When we went to put that out, remember there was just a tremendous amount of magnesium reacting with the water. And I don't know why they had so much. Huh?
Dyes for leather printing.
Something.
That's what.
Is that what it was? That pretty much wraps up the chiefs. But a couple things in closing. First of all, we need your help, especially those of you that are in the room that are members or past members of this department. Those of you that have past members of the department in your families, if you hear stories, if you find memorabilia, if by some stretch of the imagination you ever find those plaques, please let us take photos, let us make copies, whatever it is. We need to save that and try to preserve that as we move forward. I didn't say it, but I said it in Ellison Bay at the time. We are literally watching our history fade before our eyes. And we have to be able to try to stop that or preserve that. We're not going to be able to stop it, right? We are going to lose our history. But we need to be able to preserve it for the next generation. And some thank yous. We would not be successful without Miss Marianne O'Dowd. Marianne, stand up. We have had incredible partnerships with the Sister Bay Historical Society and the Liberty Grove Historical Society, two great organizations. Your Guide Publishing has been outstanding. That video today with some of their work. FM 106.9 The Lodge and Raybrook Foundation. These people our groups have all partnered with us and are leveraging their abilities, their knowledge, and their history to help us be successful. We need you to help us be successful. And most importantly, we need your willingness to share your stories. Because if we can't get you to share your stories, we're going to lose you. Okay? Any questions? I hope I didn't run too long. Any more 10 minutes? Or 15? Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
You're not in the slideshow.
I am not.
How come?
Because that'll be for somebody. That'll be a story for somebody else to tell. I am not very good about talking about myself, so I am not in there, and I won't. Somebody else is going to have to do that.
He has been interviewed.
In the long form video.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting the Sister Bay Historical.